Hey, today we're going to be talking about forms. So, in the elements of art, they go right along with shape. And so, we kind of need to know our shapes before we know our forms. So, we've talked about shape. Now it's time to make them three-dimensional. So, in your sketchbook, I want you to open up to a new blank page. And in that page, go ahead and at the top, write the word forms. You can make it 3D like I did. It's taking a while. There we go. You can make it three-dimensional like I did, but you don't have to. You can just write forms on there. And the definition, which is 3D shapes, three-dimensional shapes. So a shape is usually two-dimensional. It's got height and it's got width. But to make it three-dimensional, it needs depth. So we'll talk about that with these shapes. So the very first one we're going to talk about is the square. And go ahead and follow along in your sketchbook with me. So the square, its form is a cube. So I'm going to start with my square that I had before. Mine's kind of wonky. There. And I'm going to make it 3D by adding that depth. So I've got height, I've got width, now I need to go back and make depth. So to make a 3D square, which is called a cube, I'm going to make my three edges go back at the same angle, and then depending on which edge lines up with what, I'm going to end it with that. So this edge is going to go parallel here, and this edge is going to go parallel here. And that makes a cube. Okay, you can pause the video if I'm going too fast, but I'm just going to keep on trucking. The next one is a triangle. So our triangle, GLE, will turn into, there's two different ones. There is either the cone, which starts out with the top of my triangle, but then instead of a straight edge, it's going to be rounded. So that makes that look 3D. Or a pyramid, which also starts with the top of my triangle, but then I'm going to have one that goes longer, and I'm going to connect that to make a pyramid. These are very simple ways of doing it. Okay, the next one is a rectangle. Oops, I forgot to write this. Cone, pyramid. Y-R-A-M-I-D, pyramid. Okay, the next one is a rectangle. And rectangles can go a lot of different ways. All these shapes can go a lot of different ways. And depending on how you draw them, will change that. But I'm going to make two rectangles here. And they change to the form of a cylinder. So if I have a long, skinny rectangle, I'm going to keep those long, skinny edges and then make it round on top and then repeat this curve on the bottom. And then if I have a kind of shorter, stouter one, I might make my ellipse really long and skinny and then make my edges and then repeat this curve down here. So those become cylinders. And the last one is a circle. And that is going to become a sphere. Now, I can't do anything about my sphere here unless I add shading, which I'm going to add shading to all of these to make them look 3D. That's another way to make the form happen. Okay, so shading, let's talk about it. if there's light, depending on where my light source is, I'm going to say this is the sun. That means this is going to be my lightest section. And you see how I'm not just making a straight edge, I'm following the curve of that object. So this is where my light's going to be. And then I'm going to turn my pencil to the side and add value following that curve. To make that look 3D. If I need to go back and get rid of some of that, that would help. That shading is going to make that look even more like a form. I would take your time on this part, but I'm going kind of quick. Okay. So that circle now has become a 3D sphere. Okay, now I'm going to add value to all the rest of these. So to do that, with the cylinder, I'm going to pretend like the light is here. There's my light source. So it's going to be really light along this edge. That means my top's going to be dark. And it's going to go from really dark to really light to make that look 3D. And my light is hitting the top of this cylinder. So I'm just going to go from dark to light to dark again on this one. Make it look nice and smooth. Okay. I could also add a little bit of shading on the top, just around that edge, to give it a little more dimension. So the cone, if our light is coming from here, this is where my lightest part's going to be. So it's going to go dark to light to dark again. That gives that dimension. And then the pyramid, I'm just going to shade one side as if the light's shining over here. Make it fade off a little too. And then the square, just depending on where the light is hitting it, if the light's going to hit it over here, this is going to be my lightest edge. This is going to be a little bit darker, and this one's going to be very dark. And that gives that dimension. So those are your forms. I want you to follow along and take a picture of this and post it on the Jamboard.